to. So let's talk about it with Carl Bernstein, who, of course, shared the Pulitzer Prize for coverage of Watergate. He's now a CNN political analyst. And David Frum, a senior editor at The Atlantic. Carl, how damaging are these string of errors?
Well, they're damaging in the sense that this is taking place in a cold civil war in this country, in which neither side seems to have much interest in the best obtainable version of the truth. Too many people in our citizenry and in our institutions are looking for information that reinforces what they already believe, that buttresses their already held political prejudices, cultural beliefs, etc., etc. At the same time, look, reporters, journalists make mistakes. Our record as journalists in covering this Trump story and the Russian story is pretty good, especially compared to the record of Donald Trump and his serial lying. There's no other repertorial, historical word that describes it.
But hold on, Carl, you're saying our record is pretty good. But why would a Trump supporter believe that, given this repetitive string of errors? Because
I don't think a Trump supporter would believe it. And I think there is a suspension of belief and reasonable looking at how the media does its job on both sides. People are looking for information that reinforces what they already believe instead of the best obtainable version of the truth. We have to get back to the notion that, which is absolutely correct, that most of the media really tries, the mainstream media, the big news institutions, from the Washington Post to the New York Times to the Wall Street Journal to CNN, really go out of their way to be accurate, factual, contextual. And we do, and we've done a pretty good job of it. I would say, by and large, an excellent job of it in terms of the facts of this hugely complicated story. But, you know, we made a huge mistake in Watergate, Bob Woodward and I. And in today, in which we said that the principal assistant to the President of the United States had been implicated in grand jury testimony. In fact, he had not been implicated in grand jury testimony. Today, I wonder if we would have been fired for that mistake instead of continuing on the story. We are in a hothouse, cold Civil War atmosphere. And the press and attacking the press is the basic element that too many demagogues in our culture have used to whip up this cold Civil War, and especially to appeal to the base of the President of the United States.
David, what's your advice for journalists in this situation and for readers?
I have more advice for readers. You asked the question, Brian, why should, given these mistakes, why should people trust the media? And I would say the mistakes are precisely the reason that people should trust the media. Look, astronomers make mistakes all the time because science is a process of discovery of truth. Astrologers never make mistakes, or at least they never own up to them, because what they are offering is a closed system of ideology and propaganda. Faced with wrongdoing circled by lies, the process of piercing the lies to uncover the truth about the wrongdoing is inherently not only difficult but adversarial, because the people who are trying to find the truth are operating against bad faith actors engaged in concealment. So they get partial pieces of the truth. In the process, there are going to be overshoots and undershoots. That Bloomberg Reuters story you mentioned about Deutsche Bank.
Right.
Donald Trump holds most of his debt through Trump-related entities, not personally. So we don't know exactly what Deutsche Bank was subpoenaed to release, but it is not exactly wrong to say that when you get a Trump-related entity, you're getting something about Trump. Nonetheless, error of emphasis. But it's the process of bringing truth to light. Meanwhile, from the president and his supporters, you hear a system of lies. So they're not well placed to complain because the mistakes occur in the process of exposing the lies, that the liars then complain about the mistakes that are investigating them.
You're saying that journalists are held to a high standard appropriately, but that the president and his allies are having a low standard.
I'm saying something a little bit different. I'm saying, look, journalism is a process. The way you discover the truth as a consumer of news is not by reading any one story and thinking, aha, here's the truth. You have to be engaged in it. You have to be an active consumer, because this is unlike law enforcement, which investigates and produces conclusions at the end, journalists show their work as they go. They approximate the truth. They reach it. And in this case, they are reaching it not just because the truth is inherently difficult, but because they are confronting bad faith actors engaged actively in concealment in order to deprive the public of important knowledge of wrongdoing, financial, and national security.
Mike Allen wrote about this in his newsletter for Axios this morning. Let me put this on screen real quick, Carl. I thought this stood out to me from Mike Allen this morning. He said it's the media's best and worst of times. He said Trump's anti-media argument is not broadly true. Most reporters do work hard to be fair and accurate, and national outlets have risen to this historic era with unprecedented resources and consequential journalism. And yet, Carl, this takes us back to the point from a couple minutes ago about whether the public actually believes that.
Mike Allen is right about the general excellence of the media's coverage, particularly of Donald Trump, his presidency, and this story. I think it's very important if open-minded people, and that's what we seem to be lacking on both sides, but especially Trump supporters here, and let's say that that is the fact, especially among Trump supporters, about open-mindedness. The media, generally speaking, the mainstream media, makes far fewer errors than most institutions in our culture, because we indeed are in the business of trying not to make errors. And we have all kinds of procedures in place to keep us from making those errors. Compare us to Wall Street, compare us to banking, compare us to the Congress of the United States, compare us to almost any institution, and we make fewer errors. At the same time, we can't be complacent. We need to be introspective. And part of being introspective right now in this cold civil war is to look at where we are in this country in terms of the press being a crucial element of the cold civil war, and see if there are some ways that we, through more transparency, as well as perhaps change in tone in some instances, can make ourselves less the issue, the conduct of the press the issue, instead of the conduct of the president and those around him.
With the greatest respect to Carl and his incredible accomplishments, I really think framing this as a matter of two sides is fundamentally misleading. The press, the worst mistakes that, again, when we talk about the press, we exclude Fox. I mean, we talk about press organizations that have an interest in finding truth. Excluding Fox, the worst mistakes that press organizations have made in the coverage of Trump has precisely occurred in their effort, their overzealous effort to be fair to the president. Because the problem they cover is accurate coverage of this president and his campaign is very different from neutral coverage of this president and his campaign. I mean, how do you fairly report the fact that the president lies all the time and that he recruits people to work for him who lie all the time? The worst mistakes, in my opinion,
I'm not talking about neutrality, David. I'm not talking about neutrality. You're absolutely right.
The worst mistakes that press organizations have made, include CNN made. I mean, Raju and his co-author, the mistake they made, it was important. They promptly corrected it. The worst mistakes CNN has made have been the result of the determination to bring in-house Trump associates in order to promote Trump falsehoods, not from Trump HQ or not from the White House, but with CNN's own brand on them. And
we'll have to disagree on that one. I think we need to hear from Trump supporters, but
you need to hear them, but you need to hear from them as Trump supporters. You don't need to put your own brand on them, and that has been the worst mistake. But that comes from the desire to be unduly fair.
David Frum, Carl Bernstein, thank you very much.
Carl, if I can add one thing before we go. The best obtainable version of the truth is not necessarily about neutrality. It is about sorting through information and presenting what the facts and context are. And that is what the major news organizations have done on this story and have done very well.
Carl, come back with me after the